I want you to picture something for a second. Um, Imagine you were just sitting on your couch, scrolling through your phone after a really long day.
Oh, we've all been there.
Right. And you find yourself hate watching one of those, incredibly slick, obviously wealthy internet influencers. You know the exact type I am talking about.
Oh, absolutely. The ones with the perfect lighting.
Yes, the ones who sit in front of a ring light in this meticulously curated room that looks like, I don't know, a high-end furniture catalog, and they are selling some kind of spiritual cleansing or a course on aligning your vibrations, all for an exorbitant fee.
And you just know they are faking it. Like, it's so obvious.
Exactly. You know they are faking it. They know they are faking it. They are just raking in the cash from vulnerable people who are, desperate for some kind of anchor in their
Yeah,
lives.
they're preying on that desperation.
So hold that image in your head and ask yourself, what would happen if that exact person, armed with nothing but their fake crystals, their ring light, and a smartphone, walked into a house that was genuinely, terrifyingly haunted by something ancient and evil?
I mean, that is just the ultimate collision of worlds right there. It's the completely superficial, manufactured reality of the internet meeting the unfathomably profound, ancient reality of cosmic horror.
And that collision is exactly what we are diving into today. A contemporary fiction short story titled Good Vibes by A.M. Larouche.
It's such a brilliant story.
It really is. And we are also pulling from a critical review and this really extensive legal breakdown from freedomfiction.com. That's going to give us the real-world context for how people like the protagonist in this story actually operate out there in the wild.
Right, because our mission today is to comprehensively analyze this intersection of modern hustle culture, internet grifting, and psychological horror.
Yeah,
It's so relevant right now.
definitely. Is how the story fundamentally rewires our expectations of the horror genre. Like, when we think of the classic exorcism or possession narrative, our cultural touchstones are very established.
Yeah, they are deeply ingrained. If you look at the archetypes laid down by stories from, the mid-20th century onward, we always expect the pious, self-doubting priest.
Oh, for sure. Standing in a dark room, clutching a crucifix, wrestling with his own faith.
Exactly. Or we expect the innocent, naive victim who accidentally stumbled into something dark by, like, playing with a board game they shouldn't have touched.
The classic battle of good versus evil. Pure faith confronting pure darkness. But this author completely upends those classic horror tropes.
They really do. Because instead of a holy warrior or an innocent bystander, our protagonist is this unlikable, highly manipulative, incredibly entertaining predator.
She is just awful, but you can't look away.
Right. And the true excellence of this story, as the Freedom Fiction Review points out, lies in how it uses modern digital culture as the vehicle for ancient nameless dread.
Yes, exactly. We are talking about the world of algorithms and followers and engagement farming, acting as the conduit for something far older and honestly more sinister than the internet itself.
It's a terrifying concept.
Let's start by looking closely at this protagonist because she is a fascinating character study. Her name is Langley, and we have to establish her core motivation right out of the gate.
Which is that Langley is not a believer.
Not at all. No, she is an absolute opportunist. The author gives us this incredible background for her, revealing that she did not start out in the spiritual realm at all.
Yeah, she fell into this particular grift after a failed career in finance, right?
That's right. That finance career left her in massive debt, but it also exposed her to an environment that fundamentally shaped her worldview. She spent years observing hedge fund managers.
And she came to view them as the most delusional beasts on the planet, which is a great line.
It's such a specific detail, but it's crucial for understanding her entire psychology and why she is so effective at what she does. She observed these hedge fund managers worshiping the stock ticker because she realized that they were entirely consumed by an intangible system of belief. I mean, the stock market, at its core, is just a consensus hallucination. Right, it only works because everyone agrees it has value. And the leap she makes from observing this is both cynical and brilliantly entrepreneurial.
She concludes that any entrenched belief system, whether it is an unwavering faith in a deity, a devotion to the cosmos, or an obsession with the stock market, requires a massive emotional and psychological investment.
And to Langley, anything that requires that level of blind investment is inherently exploitable. She essentially looks at religion and spirituality not as universal truths to be discovered, but as untapped markets to be captured.
Apt markets, exactly.
It reminds me of a day trader who is shorting a volatile stock, Langley is essentially shorting people's spiritual anxieties
Oh, that is a perfect analogy.
because she sees that people are terrified. They feel disconnected. They feel like there are literal or metaphorical demons in their lives. And instead of trying to heal that anxiety, she bets against it.
She views all spiritual vulnerability as just another exploitable market trend, and she is highly efficient about how she captures that market.
She bypasses the traditional institutions entirely. The story uses this wonderful phrasing describing how she leaves behind the Luddites of Christianity who were locked in their dark cathedral booths.
Yeah, she views traditional religious structures, dioceses, bishops, physical buildings as totally inefficient. She actually refers to the physical world as meat space.
Meat space, which is such a derisive term highlighting her preference for the digital realm, because she doesn't need a church with a leaky roof and an expensive mortgage.
For church's Instagram.
Exactly. Her church's Instagram and her collection plate is a mandatory $495 down payment for a virtual session.
It's wild. She realizes she can reach anyone, anywhere on the globe. As long as they have an internet connection and a credit card, it is an infinitely scalable business model.
Which is where the true horror of her character design comes into focus. Because, like we mentioned, classic horror often features an exorcist whose power is divine.
But Langley is a creature of pure capitalism. Her power is algorithmic. To sustain this scalable business model, she engages in a strategy known in digital marketing as engagement farming.
I want to pause and dig into that term, engagement farming, because it is so central to how she operates. We hear that thrown around a lot regarding social media, but what is the actual mechanism at play here?
So engagement farming is the deliberate manipulation of social media algorithms to maximize visibility, often at the complete expense of authenticity or coherence.
Because the platforms just want to keep you scrolling.
Exactly. Social media platforms are designed to keep users on the site as long as possible so they can be served more advertisements. To achieve this, the algorithms prioritize content that elicits a strong emotional reaction.
And usually that reaction is anger, right?
Yes, from a neurological standpoint, content that triggers the amygdala, the part of the brain responsible for processing fear and anger, is far more likely to keep a user engaged than content that makes them feel content or peaceful.
Outrage is incredibly sticky.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
And Langley understands this mechanism perfectly. She doesn't just want devoted followers. She actively cultivates outrage to drive her metrics.
And she does this by intentionally creating theological chaos. She will use a Catholic crucifix in one video, talk about astral projection in the next, and then pivot to the Akashic records or clearing your chakras.
It's a complete mess of concepts.
For any listeners who might not be familiar with that grab bag of terms, astral projection is the idea that your consciousness can leave your physical body and travel the universe.
Right.
The Akashic records are a theosophical concept of this cosmic library containing the history of every thought or action that has ever occurred. And chakras refer to energy centers in the body derived from ancient Indian spiritual traditions.
And stringing all of these together with a Christian crucifix is, from a theological or historical standpoint, completely nonsensical.
Oh, it makes no sense at all. But theological coherence is completely irrelevant to her strategy.
In fact, the incoherence is the whole point. The goal is to wriggle under the skin of every conceivable demographic.
Right. By mixing these traditions so carelessly, she harvests an audience of desperate, devoted fans who think she is a genuine, eclectic miracle worker. But, equally importantly, she harvests an audience of rabid purists and skeptics.
The zealots. The ones who immediately jump into the comments to type out, "You're a fraud," or "You are disrespecting this ancient tradition," or "This is devil worship."
Yes, and that is the exact trap they fall into. Because the algorithm, the underlying code that dictates what gets seen, does not possess the capacity to understand context.
No, it cannot differentiate between a comment that is offering praise and a comment that is offering condemnation. It only measures the volume of interactions.
So every time someone hate watches her video and leaves an angry comment, they are signaling to the platform that this content is highly engaging, and that pushes it to thousands of other feeds.
Langley monetizes both the faith of the vulnerable and the outrage of the cynical. It drives her visibility up, and she makes thousands of dollars in the process.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here for a moment.
Go for it.
If she is providing a service that people are willingly paying for, and it brings them some measure of comfort, even if it's just a placebo effect, is she really a villain?
That's a fair question to ask.
Right, because isn't it a bit patronizing to assume that adults can't choose to spend their money on a digital exorcism if it helps them sleep at night? You could argue she is just providing a modern form of entertainment disguised as wellness.
That is a very common defense of this industry, but it completely ignores the underlying predatory nature of the transaction.
How so?
The harm lies in the exploitation of genuine distress. The people paying for these services are often experiencing severe psychological, emotional, or even undiagnosed medical crises.
Ah, I see. So they really need real help.
Exactly. By offering a manufactured placebo and presenting it as a legitimate cure, she isn't just taking their money, she is potentially delaying them from seeking actual professional help.
Oh, wow. That makes it much darker.
And furthermore, she is actively fostering a dependency on her ongoing expensive cleansings. It is an extraction model, not a healing model.
And for Langley, this virtual grift is incredibly safe. It is a controlled environment where she can hit the end stream button whenever she wants.
But her greed eventually overrides her desire for safety. Which brings us to the inciting incident of the story, the house call.
Yes, the house call. She receives a message from a client named Michael, and his symptoms are severe.
Very severe. He is complaining of restless nights, waking up with crushing chest pain, and experiencing violent, highly disturbing, intrusive thoughts.
Like having visions of holding a meat cleaver to his throat and feeling impulses to commit horrific acts in public. He is literally begging for her intervention.
And he offers to pay a substantial premium, an extra $1,000, bringing the total to $1,500 if she will perform an in-person session since they happen to live in the same city.
And Langley normally despises house calls, right? Because they are an inefficient use of her time. She prefers the scalable model.
Right, but she looks at that $1,500 and she agrees.
I love how the author sets up this scene because the aesthetic clash is fantastic. We get this detailed look at Langley setting up her phone to film a "Get Ready With Me to Exorcise Demons" video.
Which is such a specific, absurd internet subculture.
It really is. The "Get Ready With Me" video where influencers talk casually to the camera while applying makeup and choosing an outfit, creating this totally false sense of intimacy.
And what does she wear to this exorcism?
She settles on a bandeau waist dress with a watercolor puff skirt, gold stiletto mules, and heavy layers of gold jewelry.
Perfect exorcism attire.
Naturally. She grabs her designer slouchy leather bag, throws in her completely random theologically contradictory assortment of props like a Bible, tarot cards, sage, a wooden cross, and drives over to his house in her Mercedes-Benz.
It is the ultimate influencer armor. She's wrapping herself in luxury and superficiality, projecting an image of absolute control and success.
But the moment she steps out of her Mercedes and walks through Michael's front door, the entire tone of the story fractures. The prose shifts dramatically.
It's a huge pivot. We move entirely away from the sterile, bright, ringlit world of digital aesthetics into a masterclass of grotesque, visceral, environmental horror.
The descriptions in this section are incredibly intense. The author leans heavily into sensory language.
Oh, absolutely. The smell is awful.
Langley walks in, and the stench is the first thing that hits her. It is described as the smell of rotting meat left to ferment in a damp, enclosed space.
And the visual details are just as bad. The hallway is characterized as a sticky yellow mouth with walls that seem to possess their own bacterial luminescence.
There are thick layers of moss growing on the floorboards, physically swallowing the sharp sound of her expensive gold stilettos. And the ceiling, the paint is hanging down in long, damp strips that look like melting flesh.
And Michael is just standing there casually batting the peeling paint out of his face like it's a completely normal Tuesday.
It's so unsettling.
The author is utilizing a very specific type of atmospheric dread here, leaning heavily into tropes that evoke a Lovecraftian nightmare.
For listeners unfamiliar with the term, Lovecraftian horror, named after the early 20th century writer H.P. Lovecraft, emphasizes the cosmic insignificance of humanity.
Right. It often features environments that defy natural laws, non-Euclidean geometry, and a sense of ancient, incomprehensible monstrosity that induces madness simply by being observed.
So the physical decay of Michael's house isn't just poor maintenance. It is an environment that feels hostile to natural life, corrupted by something deeply unnatural.
And the brilliance of this scene is the juxtaposition of this ancient, rotting, incomprehensible environment against Langley's aggressively shallow modern mindset.
That is the darkest, most humorous part of the whole setup to me. She is standing in a house that smells like a slaughterhouse and looks like a biological hazard, and she is not running for her life.
No, her primary concern is completely materialistic.
She is looking at some mysterious, viscous ooze covering the kitchen island, and she is doing the mental math on whether setting her designer slouchy leather bag down on it will permanently ruin the leather.
She is entirely insulated by her own narcissism. Her internal monologue reveals that she is also intensely worried about the public relations implications of the situation.
Oh, right. She's terrified of getting canceled.
Exactly. She is genuinely terrified that if she turns around and walks out simply because her client's house is a biohazard, he might take to social media and try to cancel her.
She worries he might frame her retreat as discrimination or ableism against a client struggling with mental health or executive dysfunction.
Her fear of losing her digital reputation, her fear of the algorithm turning against her, completely overrides her primal evolutionary survival instincts.
You know, I was thinking about the specific language the author uses here, all this imagery of fungus and spores and bacterial luminescence. I wonder if that choice is deeply intentional on a symbolic level.
How do you mean?
Well, is the physical rot of the house meant to be a dark mirror to Langley herself? Think about it. A fungus operates by quietly spreading spores, taking root in damp, vulnerable environments, and silently consuming the host from the inside out.
Wow.
That is exactly what Langley's business model does. She acts as a digital parasite. She infects the feeds of vulnerable people, consumes their financial and emotional resources, and leaves them hollowed out.
That is a really profound analytical reading of the text.
She has been spreading this fake viral infection online, and now she is forced to step inside a house consumed by a literal physical manifestation of a stronger, older parasite.
Right. The parasitic nature of her digital existence is finally met with a physical parasite that she cannot manipulate or monetize. She assumes she is the ultimate predator in any room she enters.
But she's not.
No, by placing her in a house consumed by literal rot, the story forces the modern digital parasite to confront an ancient physical one, and she is completely unequipped for that reality.
So she decides she can't risk the PR nightmare of being canceled, and she certainly isn't going to walk away from a $1,500 payday. She agrees to sit down and do the consultation.
But every surface in the kitchen is covered in slime, so she decides the floor is her only option.
Yeah, they sit down directly on the moss-covered floorboards facing each other. And this is where the narrative shifts gears again, moving from environmental dread to a complete and total collapse of subjective reality.
The consultation scene is where the narrative ground completely drops out from under the reader. Michael sits across from her, his eyes completely deadened.
And he casually begins smearing a thick, dark substance that looks and smells exactly like motor oil onto his jeans. And as he does this, he begins explaining the genesis of his possession.
And the origin story of his demon is incredibly modern. It wasn't a dusty book in a library or playing with an occult object in a graveyard.
No, he explains that it started while he was playing a competitive video game online. His teammates were screaming at him over the voice chat.
They were hurling toxic abuse, yelling at him to rip out his computer's hard drive to destroy it.
And he explains that eventually those screaming voices stopped coming through the headset. They stopped being his teammates' voices and started becoming his own internal desires.
The voices told him he wanted to see the inside of people's bodies. They told him he wanted to force the girl working at the local gas station to love him against her will.
It is a brilliant modernization of the concept of demonic temptation. The author takes the very real, very prevalent issue of toxic anonymity and radicalization in online gaming communities and elevates it to a supernatural threat.
The intrusive, violent thoughts are born directly from the digital sludge of the internet. And how does Langley react to this deeply disturbing, potentially dangerous confession?
She defaults to her grift. She treats his profound psychological or spiritual crisis like a tech support ticket.
Exactly like a tech support ticket.
She runs through a bag of props, trying to quickly categorize him into a demographic so she can perform the corresponding fake ritual and just leave.
Right. She goes down the checklist. First, she pulls out the crystals. She holds them up, and he gives absolutely no reaction. It does nothing.
So she moves to the next item, the holy water. She sprinkles it, and he actually flinches. He whips his head around, his dead eyes suddenly sparking with anger, and he demands to know what she is doing.
He's desperate, practically begging her, asking, Don't you know what's wrong with me?
And the terrifying truth is that she doesn't. She has absolutely no idea what she is dealing with. To try and placate him, she reaches out and grabs his hands.
And the moment skin makes contact, reality shatters.
Langley is plunged into a relentless sequence of terrifying, highly vivid hallucinations.
The pacing of this sequence is relentless. The hallucinations begin by targeting her domain technology.
Right. She attempts to pull out her phone to record him, likely for content or leverage, and the screen just dies.
But it doesn't just power down. It violently explodes in a shower of sparks in her hands, burning her. She drops it in absolute terror.
But then Michael just looks at her calmly. She blinks, and the phone is resting perfectly fine in the palm of her hand, completely intact.
Then the hallucinations escalate into extreme physical violence. She looks back at Michael, and suddenly thick, dark blood is pouring from his eyes and nose.
His chest violently collapses inward, and she sees her own wooden cross, one of the cheap props from her designer bag, buried deep into his skull like a scythe.
And then she blinks again, and the cross is gone. He is just staring at her.
Then she is hit with a horrifying out-of-body vision. She experiences a flash forward where she sees herself fleeing the house, driving all the way home in a panic.
As she sees herself walk into her pristine kitchen, take her precious designer leather bag, and bake it inside her oven.
And then, and this is by far the most disturbing part, she sees herself grabbing her little fluffy dog, Basil, and snapping his neck with her bare hands.
It is a complete and utter psychological rupture. Her mind is projecting her deepest fears of losing control and destroying the things she values, her status symbols, and her pet.
She is violently snapped back to the present reality, realizing she is still sitting on the moss-covered floor, still holding Michael's cold, oily hands.
Desperate to regain control, she tries one last theatrical trick. She lights a black candle to perform a spell, hoping the visual will calm him down.
As she moves the candle near his head, the flame suddenly leaps to his hair. He is instantly engulfed in roaring flames.
He is burning alive right in front of her, screaming in unimaginable agony. The heat's so intense, she can feel it catching the fabric of her own dress on fire.
And then she opens her eyes. The room is quiet. Michael is sitting perfectly still. The tiny, weak flame of the black candle is just flickering harmlessly beside his cheek.
It is exhausting just to read that sequence. You feel completely unmoored as a reader.
Yeah.
And this is where the Freedom Fiction Review makes its strongest analytical point.
What's that?
The review highlights that the greatest literary achievement of Good Vibes is its sustained uncertainty. We never, ever get a definitive, objective answer from the author as to what actually happens in that room.
That's so true. The text is meticulously constructed to support multiple, equally plausible frameworks for interpretation.
Exactly. Frame 1 is the literal supernatural reading. Michael is genuinely possessed by an ancient demonic entity.
And this entity recognizes Langley for the fraud she is, and it is flexing its power, systematically dismantling her reality to show her how utterly useless her fake internet tools are against true darkness.
Frame 2 is a psychological reading. Langley is simply having a massive, stress-induced psychotic break.
Right. She has been overworking herself, constantly engaging with the toxic sludge of internet hate, desperation, and the demands of algorithm farming.
And her fragile mental state finally snaps
Mm-hmm.
when confronted with a genuinely deeply disturbed individual.
And frame 3 is a physiological reading. She has been drugged.
Yes, Michael's handshake was described as wet and oily. His house is filled with noxious chemical smells, fermenting meat, and fungal spores. It is entirely possible she absorbed a hallucinogenic or toxic substance through her skin or lungs.
I want to challenge that second framework, though. The idea that this is just a story about a psychotic break or a bad trip.
Oh, why is that?
Well, if we accept the premise that Langley is just losing her mind or got drugged by some mold spores, the story shrinks. It becomes a mundane tragedy about mental health or accidental poisoning.
I see what you mean.
But consider the alternative. If we look at it through the cosmic horror lens, if the universe itself is actively punishing her for faking miracles her entire adult life by locking her in a room with a real, tangible nightmare, then the story elevates into this brilliant, dark, cosmic joke.
Oh, that's a great point.
It is like she spent her whole life pretending to be an elite surgeon on Instagram, building a massive following by doing fake operations on mannequins.
Yeah.
And then one day, a patient walks in with a real, terrifying, chest-bursting alien parasite, and she looks down at her hands and realizes she is holding a plastic toy stethoscope.
That toy stethoscope analogy perfectly captures the terrifying absurdity of her situation. Her tools, the sage, the crystals, the buzzwords, are only effective on the gullible and the willing.
They're utterly impotent in the face of the profound.
Exactly. And this ambiguity raises a deeply unsettling philosophical question about the nature of subjective experience versus objective truth.
For Langley, the fire, the sparks burning her hands, the sight of the cross embedded in the skull, those events were entirely real in the moment she experienced them.
The neurological trauma she endures is real, regardless of whether the objective reality of the room remained unchanged.
Right. The story forces us to ask, if an experience breaks your mind, does it matter if it couldn't be caught on a security camera?
And simply fleeing the physical space of the house does not save her from that trauma.
No, not at all. After the candle hallucination, she finally hits her breaking point. She throws her designer bag at him, scrambles across the moss, struggles through the heavy sliding glass door, runs to her Benz, and just peels out of the driveway, hyperventilating.
She manages to drive home, and she is terrified, shaking, and traumatized. But almost immediately, the ingrained instincts of the digital grifter kick back in.
The grifter's mind never truly powers down. Even while actively processing extreme trauma, her first coherent thought upon arriving in the safety of her own home is how to spin the narrative.
She realizes she needs a preemptive public relations defense.
Right. She formulates a plan to take the video she attempted to record in the house and post it online. Her goal is to completely ruin Michael's reputation, frame him as a dangerous, unhinged monster, and use the footage as justification for keeping his $1,500 payment without completing the session.
But then we get the twist, and it is deeply chilling.
She pulls up the video file on her phone to review the footage before posting it. She presses play, bracing herself to see the disgusting moss, the yellow bacterial ooze, the melting walls, and the terrifying dead-eyed monster she'd just escaped.
Instead, the video shows a perfectly normal, somewhat boring house.
It shows a perfectly clean, polished floor, and it shows a normal, reasonably well-groomed Michael just sitting there looking at the camera.
She rewinds it, plays it again, zooming in over and over. And the digital record, the very medium she built her entire empire upon, actively gaslights her lived reality.
This revelation completely shatters her final tether to sanity. Modern humans, and internet influencers in particular, increasingly outsource our memory and our validation to our digital devices.
When those devices flatly contradict our internal experience, we have no internal fortress left to retreat to. It removes the objective proof she relied upon to validate her terror.
And the ending of the story is deeply disturbing because of how she reacts to this shattered reality. She doesn't seek help. She gives in completely to whatever it is she brought back with her, whether it is madness, possession, or a supernatural contagion.
She sits alone in her immaculate house, and the narrative tells us she craves rest. But her internal definition of rest has become horrifying.
She craves 100 milliliters of fresh blood. She looks at her dog Basil and wants to rip the viscera from his belly and drink it like a fine wine.
And most terrifyingly, she wishes to scatter her own consciousness across the globe in a million pieces, like spores from a rotting forest.
She desires to become what the author calls a floating infection.
A floating infection. That specific phrase is just permanently etched in my brain.
Going back to the Freedom Fiction Review, they note that one of the potential weaknesses of the story's structure is that Michael is kept intentionally opaque.
Right. We never get his perspective. We don't know the emotional depth of his suffering, and we don't really know what happens to him after she runs away. He exists purely as a catalyst for Langley's downfall.
But while the reviewer frames that opacity as a slight narrative limitation, I would argue that keeping Michael a blank slate is exactly why the horror functions so effectively.
Idea.
By locking the narrative entirely within Langley's very unreliable, highly subjective point of view, the revelation of the clean video footage hits the reader with the exact same blunt force that it hits her.
Oh, that makes sense. We are equally disoriented. For 20 pages, we trusted her detailed narration of the sticky walls, the rotting meat, and the peeling paint.
Suddenly, the objective eye of the camera tells us we were completely wrong. It emphasizes the concept that the bad vibes Michael possessed acted like a literal contagion.
Langley didn't just observe his madness, she caught it. She became infected by his reality.
It is exactly like a viral internet meme, but weaponized. Think about Langley's entire life goal up to this point.
She spent her career trying to go viral.
Yes, she wanted to spread her fake spirituality as far and wide as the algorithm would allow. She wanted, as the text states, existence for infinity.
And in the end, the universe grants her exactly what she wanted, but in the most horrific way imaginable.
She has literally become a host for a cosmic virus.
She achieved her goal of virality, She got exactly what she asked for, but the monkey's paw curled. She's no longer faking it. She's now a genuine vector for spiritual and psychological rot.
I want everyone listening to pause and think about how heavily you rely on video or photographic proof to validate your own life.
We all do it.
If you see something incredible or terrifying or even just mildly interesting, the immediate knee-jerk instinct is to pull out your phone and record it. It didn't happen unless there's a picture.
Exactly.
So what happens to your own sanity when the digital record, the ultimate arbiter of modern truth, tells you that what you felt, what you smelled, what you saw with your own eyes simply did not happen?
That gap between lived experience and digital proof is the modern vulnerability Larouche has tapped into here. It exposes a profound fragility in our modern psyche.
When our devices contradict us, our reality crumbles, which naturally brings us to a fascinating, highly relevant real-world question.
How does a societal ecosystem exist that allows a predator like Langley to thrive in the first place?
Right. Why isn't building a massive commercial enterprise based on selling fake digital exorcisms illegal?
That is exactly where the Freedom Fiction public service announcement provides some incredible grounded context.
We are shifting from the supernatural horror of the fiction to the very real, very legal horror of the real world. Because people exactly like Langley are operating right now on your phone, and they are making millions of dollars doing it.
How do they get away with it? Well, to understand that, we have to look closely at the legal architecture, particularly in the United States.
It ultimately comes down to the bedrock of the First Amendment.
Right. The U.S. Constitution strictly protects freedom of religion and expression. Historically, this was designed to protect minority fringe religions from being persecuted by Protestant majorities.
And today, this protection extends broadly to all belief systems, including occultism, witchcraft, Wicca, New Age spirituality, and Satanism.
In the eyes of the law, the beliefs themselves and the rituals associated with them are entirely legal. The government is constitutionally barred from dictating whether your spiritual beliefs are valid or invalid.
There was actually a landmark 1944 Supreme Court case, United States v. Ballard, that established that courts cannot judge the objective truth of a religious doctrine, only the sincerity with which it is held.
And on a foundational level, that is a good thing. We want a society that guarantees freedom of belief.
But the complication arises when you introduce commerce into the equation. It's one thing to believe you can cleanse an aura. It's another to charge someone $500 for it.
That is the crucial boundary line. When you start charging money for spiritual services, it transitions from purely religious expression to commercial speech, which is subject to government regulation.
However, because lawmakers are terrified of infringing on First Amendment rights, those regulations are largely left to a patchwork of state and local laws, which vary wildly.
For instance, some municipalities have enacted what are known as anti-divination ordinances.
What do those do?
These are local laws that might force a psychic, a tarot card reader, or a digital exorcist like Langley to explicitly market their services with a very specific, legally mandated disclaimer, strictly for entertainment purposes.
And you also have federal oversight from agencies like the FDA. The Food and Drug Administration will crack down incredibly hard if an influencer tries to sell a crystal, a tea, or a potion and explicitly claims that it cures a physical illness, like cancer, or a diagnosed mental health condition, like schizophrenia or clinical depression.
Because the moment you make a specific medical claim, you cross the line into practicing medicine without a license, which is a severe federal crime.
But knowing this, a savvy grifter like Langley knows exactly how to navigate this legal minefield. She treats the First Amendment like a corporate tax loophole.
She keeps her promises intentionally legally vague. She's very careful never to claim she can cure schizophrenia. She claims she can cure spiritual vampires or bad vibes.
She operates entirely within the gray area of spiritual wellness. By using this coded language, she ensures she never triggers an FDA investigation while simultaneously raking in cash under the broad, protective umbrella of religious expression.
It is wild when you contrast the American legal approach with the laws in other countries. The freedom fiction piece brings up the legal context in India, which provides a fascinating counterexample.
Yeah, India is a deeply spiritually inclined nation with thousands of years of varied religious traditions. Studying occult sciences, astrology, or traditional healing is not illegal on a national level.
But several specific states within India have recognized the danger of these practices and enacted strict laws against the fraudulent commercialization of them.
The prime example highlighted in the research is the state of Maharashtra. They passed a piece of legislation known as the Anti-Superstition and Black Magic Act.
The history behind this act is deeply tied to the socio-economic realities of the region. Historically, there have been massive issues with self-proclaimed godmen exploiting vulnerable, often rural and impoverished populations, offering fake magical cures for serious diseases or financial ruin.
To combat this, Maharashtra made it a criminal, non-bailable offense to claim supernatural powers for the purpose of defrauding people.
Under this law, it is illegal to cause physical pain to someone under the guise of an exorcism, and it is strictly illegal to perform fake miracles for financial gain.
So if Langley tried to run her Instagram exorcism business from an apartment in Mumbai instead of a high-rise in Seattle, her online empire of fake miracles wouldn't just be frowned upon, it would land her in a jail cell immediately.
It is a non-bailable offense. The state actively prosecutes the exact business model she uses to get incredibly wealthy in America.
It highlights a profound philosophical difference in how different legal systems approach the concept of human vulnerability.
Exactly. In the United States, the legal framework prioritizes absolute, almost libertarian freedom of speech and belief, operating on the principle of caveat emptor, let the buyer beware.
The assumption is that adult consumers are rational actors responsible for their own choices.
Right. But in places like Maharashtra, the legal framework operates on a different assumption. It recognizes that people seeking supernatural cures are often deeply desperate, vulnerable, and operating under extreme duress.
Therefore, the state believes they require active legislative protection from predators looking to exploit that desperation.
Building on that philosophical difference, I want to connect this legal reality back to the core terror of good vibes.
Let's do it.
Does the lack of legal regulation in places like the U.S. actually create the exact psychological vulnerabilities that horror stories prey upon?
Think about Michael. Because the state refuses to protect him from a spiritual grifter out of respect for the First Amendment, he is entirely on his own.
He has to navigate this incredibly dangerous landscape by himself. And when you are desperate, when you are having visions of holding a cleaver to your throat, your critical thinking defenses are completely down.
That is an incredibly astute way to frame the environment of the story. The horror is deeply grounded in the extreme isolation of the modern consumer.
Michael has exhausted his traditional options. Medical science hasn't provided a cure for his visions. His community is absent or unable to help. So he turns to the unregulated Wild West of the internet.
The legal vacuum creates the fertile ground necessary for predators like Langley to set up shop and thrive.
But the irony is that this same legal vacuum isolates Langley too. When she finally encounters something truly dangerous, something ancient and uncontrollable, there is no authority she can appeal to.
There is no regulatory body for cosmic horror.
Exactly. They are both completely isolated in this unregulated, chaotic marketplace of the soul.
It is a chilling thought. For everyone listening right now, I highly encourage you to do a little experiment later today.
Oh, this is a good one.
The next time you are scrolling, look closely at the disclaimers on the astrology apps on your phone, or the tarot card reading websites, or the bio of that spiritual wellness coach on Instagram.
Scroll down to the very bottom. Read the fine print that is usually in a tiny light gray font.
Notice how it almost always says for entertainment purposes only. That tiny little sentence is the legal shield. That is the armor protecting the modern Langleys of the world from the FDA and the FTC while they continue to harvest engagement and money from your deepest anxieties.
It is the fine print that separates a protected religious practice from a federal fraud indictment. And it is a stark daily reminder that in the digital age, belief, fear, and vulnerability are simply treated as commodities to be mined and traded.
We have covered a massive amount of ground today. We started by dissecting Langley, analyzing the psychology of a fascinatingly unlikable internet grifter who views faith as a financial loophole, exploiting both believers and haters through algorithmic engagement farming.
We followed her out of her digital fortress and into the visceral, fungal, Lovecraftian horror of Michael's house, where her sterile influencer aesthetic was entirely swallowed by ancient rot.
We navigated the complete collapse of her reality, debating the frameworks of madness, physiological poisoning, and a genuine cosmic punishment.
And finally, we zoomed out to look at the real-world legal ecosystems, the loopholes of the U.S. First Amendment, and the strict protections of India's anti-superstition laws that allow digital exorcists to thrive in our actual reality.
Good Vibes serves as a brilliant masterclass in modernizing the Gothic tradition. The author takes the ancient, primal fears of possession, demonic influence, and the loss of bodily autonomy, and dresses them in gold stilettos, watercolor puff skirts, and ring lights.
It serves as a powerful reminder that our modern technology does not insulate us from our deepest, oldest fears. In many ways, it simply provides a faster, more efficient, and more intimate vector for them to reach us.
And that brings me to one final terrifying implication. Something that builds on everything we've analyzed today, but takes it one step further into the real world.
What's that?
At the very end of the story, Langley completely embraces her new, horrific reality. The objective truth of the video footage doesn't offer her salvation. It completely breaks her mind.
She sits in her house, wanting to drink her dog's blood. She wants to scatter herself across the globe. She wants to be a floating infection.
But the author ends the story right there, in that moment of dark realization. It ends before the sun comes up. It ends before she picks up her phone again.
That is the lingering, unresolved thread of the narrative. What exactly happens the next day?
Consider the logistics of her life. Her entire career, her entire sense of self-worth and financial stability was built on broadcasting her life to a massive global audience.
She has an established audience of devoted followers who hang on her every word, and rabid haters who watch everything she does. Millions of people who tune in every single day to watch her perform.
What happens tomorrow morning? What happens when this newly minted floating infection, completely unmoored from reality and craving the spread of her own rot, decides to use her Instagram platform not for a fake grift, but to transmit a very real, very contagious supernatural madness straight through the screens of her millions of viewers?
The true horror of Good Vibes isn't that a fake exorcist got infected by a demon.
The true lingering horror is that the demon just gained access to the perfect, frictionless, global distribution network to spread that infection to all of us.
The algorithm is primed, optimized for outrage, and waiting for her next upload.
So the next time you find yourself sitting on the couch, endlessly scrolling through your feed, hate watching that slick influencer and thinking you are immune to their grift, just ask yourself, what exactly are they transmitting to you through that screen? And are you entirely sure your psychological defenses are as strong as you think they are?